Good morning again. Thank you for singing. Grab your Bibles if you have one, or your technology device, whatever it is that you have brought this morning. Papyrus scrolls or parchment paper. Go to Colossians chapter 3. We've got quite a few text verses. I'm not going to be long and labor this morning. Kind of a brief overview of a few verses and just make some simple comments. And the title of the message is How to Have Peace in the New Year. And this is kind of a theme we've had the last couple of weeks, peace on earth, goodwill to men. And we had last Sunday the Christmas service when our kids got up and did such a great job again singing. And it's really cool and good to hear children worship, isn't it? Our last song ended with Great Are You, Lord. That name Lord means supreme and authority. And that's one of my favorite names for God, is supreme and authority. I can remember back years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, when this was really sort of new for me and personal for me, and before I got into youth ministry and things such as that, and sort of kind of fixing my eyes on that name for God, Lord, being supreme in authority, and how that affected me and all of my personal ambitions and ideas about life and what life should be for me and what I think I should get out of life, and all those other humanistic type ideas that this is my life and I'm going to live it my way, as secular music will tell you to do, or follow your heart, or all that other nonsense that we hear from places such as secular everything, movies and music and more. I'm not anti-secular. We are in a secular world, and God designed it in a way that we don't get saved and leave the secular world, because we're supposed to have a non-secular influence on a secular world. But I just remember Lord and reading, like, why do we call him Lord, and looking it up one night with my concordance, and I think my dad had given me about that thick, a daily weapon if you decide to use it in such a way, and it just blew my mind to think every time I say Lord in my prayer, I'm calling him supreme in authority, and I don't mean it at all, because I'm still doing what I want to do. So that's hypocrisy. We've all got some hypocrisy in this. I didn't like that. Okay, so Colossians chapter 3, I want to read, we've got 1 through 15 we're going to go through briefly, but I'm going to read 1 through 4 and then pray, and then we'll go back into these verses. Colossians chapter 3, verse 1. If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. A little substitution, do you see it? For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Verse 4, when Christ, who is, listen to this, our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Let's pray this morning. Lord, again, we do thank you for who you are. We thank you for this name, Lord, that we call you by. We acknowledge that you are, whether we always realize this or not, or we apply it to our lives or not. We do confess publicly and corporately this morning that you are supreme in authority. You are the Lord of all hosts, everything, angels, armies, people, any host that we could create or imagine, you are Lord over that. And we are your flock this morning, and you are the shepherd and the Lord over this flock. So we ask you as such, we ask you to speak to us this morning. Speak to us clearly, convict our hearts, and clarify things in our lives that maybe need to be clarified for this new year. We ask you all these things in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, so now I want to get to the end of this part of the text, which is verse 15. And then I want to read first verse 15 and ask ourselves, is verse 15 disconnected from verses 1 through 14? And if it is not disconnected through those verses, then we cannot read verse 15 or quote it by itself, which we are prone to do. So at the end of this part of Paul's thinking, it certainly continues, but I'm going to stop at 15. He has these words, and let the peace of God, y'all know this verse, don't you? We all know this verse because it's quoted, and it's a great verse to quote, a great verse to memorize. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts. If I think of verse 15 this morning as far as like a New Year's message, I would usually probably do this next week. But we're having Jason Alvin will come, our West Metro strategist, who's going to kick off our 6 weeks of missions emphasis. I would say month, but it's a month and a half. And he's going to kind of take care of introducing us again to missions. That's probably the wrong word. Just re-emphasizing missions to us and the need for both local and international missions. And then again, we will have missionaries come in and kind of present their work and make what we kind of support, make it more personal. So let's take verse 15 and ask ourselves, what do we want in the new year? And if your answer is money, or more stuff, as a Christian, probably not the right answer. Now, if you're struggling financially, then it is very much legitimate to say, Lord, money's tight, and I'm not being greedy, but we could use a little more of it. Nothing wrong with that. God wants us to take care of our families and feed and pay bills and things such as that. But in a spiritual way, when I think about you guys as my church this year and the upcoming year, in 2020, the beginning of a new decade, which is just crazy to me, there's a disadvantage to living in the year of 2000 as it pertains to keeping up with decades. Because back before the year 2000, you had the 70s, right? And all those awful styles that came with it, including those vehicles. 60s were great, 70s, I don't know what happened to people. And then the 80s, and then the 90s, right? And you divided your life by the decade. And then now we have a 2020, but before then we've got 2001, then you got 10, then 11, and we went to 2011, and it didn't feel like a new decade to me. And I look back now, and it's like, we are 2 decades into the 2000s, and I'm not able to divide my life by the decade. Because it's teens. 2013, what do you do with that? Then you get older and styles, you're like, well, I don't care about styles. I mean, is it comfortable and was it cheap? Right? And apparently flannel came back in. I got a lot of flannel, and flannel's back in, I guess. And I still got flannel from 1990. This still looks pretty good, I think. So this is 2020. It's the 20s again. And I don't know if any of us were alive in the first 20s. I guess probably not, but we're close. A couple of folks, but we've got decades again. We've got 2020, which is we're calling it the year of vision, which I guess it's okay. So what is my vision for you personally this year? And I could wish a lot of things for you, and health and prosperity and all those things, but then ask myself, what can I control and influence? And I use the word control very carefully. I don't mean like control of your life, because I'm telling you, the older you get, there ain't much. You don't have a lot of control over your life. When your health is ruined by no fault of your own, there is no control over that. When your body ages, there is no control over that. But I read these verses, and I do pray for all of you to have peace this year. I mean, peace, like we said last week, just internal peace, just easy going and not anxious and stressed. And we mentioned peace with God last week, right? Peace with God, and peace with man, or peace with yourself, and then peace with man. But I want to kind of get to, how does that happen? I mean, last week is like a shotgun blast. This is, if you have peace with God, then you can have internal peace, and then you should have external peace. But we didn't have any steps last week on how to get there. So when you get in Paul's letter here in chapter 3, one big letter, Colossians, and you get to verse 15, it says, let the peace of God rule in your heart. And the word rule means arbitrator, like a judge or governor or arbitrator. Like you've got a hostile situation, and you call in a third objective party. The Southern Baptists, we do this, and we pay to our cooperative program, and one of those benefits is, whether you pay or not, one of those benefits is, as a Southern Baptist church, if you've got a hostile situation that you cannot reconcile in your church, which is sad and you should never have, but it happens because we're people and we're sinful, you call them in, and they become a third party objective arbitrator. And they kind of sort out the mess, right? And so Paul says, you can allow the peace that comes with God to arbitrate your life this year. I think that's good news, isn't it? Because like I said last week, man, Westerners maybe everybody, I don't know, we are a anxious, troubled, stressed out people. Trish and I were, and I've got a little sick one, not Sophie, Emma, this morning, but we were sitting Christmas Eve, let me see here, Christmas Eve morning, which is my side of the family's day. And Christmas Day is her side. So we got up Christmas Eve morning, and we were kind of eating breakfast, and it's early. Kids aren't up yet, and it's fairly early, for an off day. It was 8 o'clock. And we had little Sophie, and the other kids were in bed, so we were kind of enjoying some alone time with Sophie. And by 8:30, like you ladies do, there's cooking to be done, and there's organizing, and kids are off from school, so they're making a huge mess, and we men are like sitting on the couch thinking that there's absolutely nothing wrong in the house or otherwise, and we don't cook much maybe, so we can't help you cook because we don't know how to cook, unless you want me to bring a bowl of cereal or whatever. And the women get all this stuff is dumped on them, and I sit there and we're trying to enjoy this little baby. And I made this statement, and I said, next year, God willing, if we have her still, we're not going to be snuggling her on the couch. This girl is already showing signs of extreme physical activity, which is not good, really. Maybe when they're older, but not yet. Why are you kicking it? Why are all four of your limbs moving in your head? Like you're not hungry or wet or nothing, and you're going nuts. And I said, she's not. Next year, this is not going to be the case. We're not going to lay her on her leg in her lap on a little blanket and her smile when we talk to her. We're going to be saying, don't ride the dog like a horse, Sophie. Get off of Tozer or whatever. So I said, can we not just enjoy? Can we not just, I'm sorry, who in the world texts me on Sunday morning that knows me? I don't know why they would, but can we not just sit here and enjoy her? And the natural inclination Christmas Eve morning was that of what? Stress. Isn't that awful? You have a few days off from work, hopefully. You have a few days with yourself and your wife and your kids. And then somehow, as a Western civilization, we have turned off days by a fireplace into stress. And I hate it. I hate it. I really do. I don't like to use that word, but I really despise what we have done with the holidays. So I sit there and I said, can we just forget stress for a minute and forget the cooking for a minute and the organizing and whipping the kids into shape? Let's just take an hour and let's enjoy her. And we may pay for it later, and we kind of did, but let's just enjoy her. And my thought was after that, by and large, can I not have a year like that? I don't mean a year with no working. I mean a year that even with the work and with the stresses that come with paying bills and taking care of kids and all this other stuff and church and all the responsibilities that you have, can we have a peaceful year? That does not mean a non-eventful year. And I don't mean a year where nothing bad happens. But in the middle of all that, can we remain somewhat stress-free and anxious-free? And some of you are looking at me, and I know what you're thinking. You are crazy. Life is stressful, period. And I want to rephrase that. I will say, life is difficult at times, period. But according to this, it can be peaceful. So that's what I want for you this year. I want you to have peace. Peace. Okay, so let's look at how. Because verse 15, read it again, not in a vacuum. This is not an isolated verse by itself. We quote it by itself. We memorize it by itself because I can't memorize 15 verses that go with it. But it isn't by itself. Let the peace of God rule. Let the peace of God that only God gives be the arbitrator in your life this year to keep you like this, right? Flat, so you're not like this. Okay. Verse 1, we're just going to be brief here, somewhat brief, and I'm going to read these verses, and I'm going to comment as I go, like a small group, kind of a Bible study. Verse 1, if you were if you then were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above. Okay, so step number one, there's a bunch of steps here, and I probably won't call them all steps, but step number one, if you want peace, is this year you pursue Christ. Number one, you pursue Christ. Pursue those things which are above where Christ is. So another way we could say this is pursue the things which are eternal. So verse 2, almost the same as verse 1. A little more focused, a little more intense. He's going to repeat the same thing. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things of the earth. Set your mind. What in the world does set your mind mean? Listen to this. Listen to this. This is Paul's giving you a recipe for peace, and you can't skip all of this and make no attempt to do any of this and then get, January, February into the year and wonder why you're anxious and stressed and all of this, and you'll blame it on family or some situation with a sibling. I hope that isn't the case, or whatever, and you'll say, well, I'm just an anxious person, and that's just my DNA, and that's nonsense. Your DNA could be that you're somehow more anxious. I've got 3 kids now, and maybe 4, and all their personalities come out, and some are more laid back than others, and I won't get personal with them, and some are a little more up and down than others. There's benefits to both. There is. However, the arbitrator in your family where you have issues, and nobody's perfect, and no family is, and if your family's perfect, your in-laws' family won't be. You're going to get it eventually, but there can be peace. And number one is, set your mind on eternal things. And when he says set your mind, he means, listen, to earnestly exercise the mind in a certain or specific direction. In other words, not subconscious, not when I think about it, not when I go to church on Sunday, the intentional act of my mind is that I am pursuing things that will matter in 1,000 years. So if you're young this morning and you have kids, can I give you number one? Parenting. How you parent. And how you influence your children for Christ. And if your children are going to be in heaven with you when verse 4 happens. When Christ returns and you return with him in glory. What else do you have eternal as a young parent? Not a whole lot. You go to work and it's going to burn up, right? All that we work for, most of it, especially if it's a secular vocation, you work for one of my first jobs, I worked for a bearing company. And we built bearings. We had aircraft bearings. We had all sorts of machinery bearings. We had this bearing that cost $100, and a dude called one time, it was this big around, and he said, I'm losing $5,000 an hour because a $100 bearing is broke. Can you bring one to me? You know what? One day, none of that's going to matter because the bearings and the balls inside them and the grease that keeps it all lubricated, you know what's going to happen to it? It's going to burn. The airplane that it kept in the air, it's going to burn. All of the promotions that you got, which are good, those are good things. If you have a job, you should work for promotion. You should want to excel. But it's going to burn up, isn't it? And almost a lot of what we have to do because we're left here on earth it's going to burn up. And some of that's no fault of our own. It's just God's design. So take your life this year and think, I have to go to work, I have to pay bills, I'm supposed to, there's responsibilities I have, but in the middle of all of that, what can I set my mind towards that is going to matter in 1,000 years? Because that is step number one in having peace. And so let's make a life application here. You ever lay your head down at night, as a parent, grandparent, maybe when you were a parent, and I've said this before, but you have this terrifying thought that you're making a million mistakes as a parent. You ever do that? And then you're like, well, what kind of kid am I producing? You know what I mean? What are they? In 50 years, Are they going to be crazy and like off their rocker? Are they going to be a good citizen? Are they going to love God? Are they going to be humanistic? Are they going to, despite everything we teach them, am I doing enough? Have I taught them how to succeed in a vocation? All these thousands of things, can they go slay a deer and eat if Publix closes down? Right? Well, I'm 1 for 4. The other 3 not so much. We slayed a deer a couple years ago, and we ate it. If that offends you, well, your salad, if you don't eat it, a cow's going to eat it, and he's going to turn it into food for me, so it's all the same. But you know what when I rest my head at night, and I promise you I'm making 1,000 mistakes as a parent that trouble me, because I see them later when you have a 17-year-old, you start seeing yourself, and you're like, oh man, not good. Some things, there's little things you're like, oh, I need to coach that out of them. Where did that come from? Oh, me. But I can lay my head down and I can say, you know what? All the mistakes we're making, they're going to know something. We love God, and we take the Bible seriously. And do you know what that brings me to my troubled heart when I think of all the mistakes I'm making? It brings some peace. Because maybe not to the best of my ability, maybe most of the time, to the best of my ability, we are trying to teach them to set their minds on things that matter in 1,000 years. And most of what we see does not. All the coaching we've done in basketball or soccer, it is not going to matter. Okay, so that's step number 1. We're focused on the eternal. In verse 3, and this is a quick reminder, if you died and your life is hidden with Christ in God, you are dead. Your desires and ambitions and all those other things that you were born with, they're dead now, because your life is hid with Christ in God. So in other words, we pursue Christ as he's connected and unified with the Father, and we're believers, and we're unified with the Trinity. In John chapter 17, we're all one, and Christ prayed that we would be one. So then, in order to have peace, we are to act like we are one, which means one in focus, which means that is exactly why in January we start out with a focus or an emphasis on missions. Because as a pastor, that's going to bring me some peace. Because we make mistakes as pastors too. Just like parents, just like on your job or anywhere else, you make mistakes. But you try to say, let me get the big things right. Verse 5, therefore, so this is, listen, he's kind of giving us a big picture. Focus on Christ, focus on the eternal, whatever that means in your life, whatever that looks like. Verse 5, therefore, based on this, put to death your members which are on the earth. You're still here. What are those members? And now, remember, we're looking for peace. And we can't ignore verse 1 through 14 and look at verse 15 and say, well, I'll let the peace of God rule in my heart and be the arbitrator. Because listen, if we ignore verse 1 through 14, the peace of God will not be the arbitrator in our life. Because we've ignored the steps to get there. Put to death your members, which are on the earth. This is your physical body. Fornication, uncleanliness, passion. That's interesting, isn't it? That doesn't always mean like passion, like boy girl passion. That's what you lust to have this year. Jeep CJ7. Can I get an amen, Mike Green? Every time I pass a Jeep, I want one. I just do. It's going to burn one day. It's going to melt. It's literally going to melt. And the earth is going to be recreated. And there won't be any Jeeps on it. Which is kind of sad, but it must be better than with Jeeps on it, or they would be on it. Put to death your members which are on earth, fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. And where does every sin come from? Idolatry. Think of any sin that you can imagine that you've ever committed or ever might commit, or watch other people committing, which is easier than watching yourself do it. And you can bet your bottom dollar the root cause is idolatry. I want my life instead of what Christ gives me. That is the definition of idolatry. You don't have to form an image. You don't have to pour gold into a little template thing and have like a weird little carving. You don't have to take a rock like the Indians did 500 years ago here and carve little things that look like whatever, or worship the river or the moon or anything else. You don't have to do any of those things. All we have to do as a believer to not have peace is say, I want what I want. Like Charlie Brown, I only want what's coming to me. Right? That's all we got to say. And peace is, it's gone at that point. We can't pursue selfish ambition and have peace. Verse 6, because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked, past tense, when you lived in them. But now you yourselves are to put off all of these. Can I tell you something? There are certain aspects of the Christian life where you read your Bible and sort of like, not automatically, but you're purified, right? You become more like Christ. But you can't become so passive that you think, I'll do my daily devotion in the morning, and whatever God does with me, He does with me. If you go that far, it's getting almost like fatalistic as a Christian. Well, I read my Bible for 10 minutes. I read my daily bread or whatever, which is great. I'm done. God's changing me, hopefully. Paul is giving us very specific steps that take effort. For it is Christ who works in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. The verse before that, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. There is a part that we do in sanctification, and there is no doubt a part that God does. And God starts the process, and He ensures that it's going to happen. And by the way, in verse 4, He's going to finish it completely, and we will be perfectly glorified. But we're not there yet. So in verse 8, He says, you yourselves, us, we put off these things. Anger, wrath. That's like the outcome of anger. We stay angry so long it becomes like passionate violence. And by the way, they don't have to be physical. Malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie one to another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds. Transition, verse 10. And you have put on the new man, which is renewed. How? In knowledge, according to the image of Him who created him. So, if you sit here this morning and you say, okay, 2020, your vision, my vision is I want peace. I want to be more relaxed this year. I don't want everything to bother me. I don't want to be a roller coaster. And even if bad things come or I carry difficult things into the new year, I still want to have peace. My health is bad, I still want peace. I have a loved one that is not going to make it probably this year, you might say, I want peace. And Paul says, you can have it. And Paul says, pursue Christ. And then in verse 10, he gives us a tool. Right? I can look at my son and say, hey, go make the yard look nice. Just make it look better. There's leaves everywhere, fix it. Right? But I've got to do a couple things. I've got to give him the knowledge to do it and the tool to do it. And interestingly, in the Bible, they're one and the same. The knowledge is the tool, the Bible. And so if you look ahead in 2020 and say, yes, I want what my pastor's talking about. I want peace. I'm anxious. I'm stressed. I have anxiety issues from who knows what as a kid or stuff you've done to yourself to cause it. Paul says you can have peace. And Paul says, I open the Bible, and the knowledge of Christ is what motivates me to put off the old man and put on the new man. You know what's crazy to me, even in church and being on staff for 15 years now as a pastor, associate pastor, youth pastor, one of the three for the last 15 years, is that some of the most anxious people I've ever met are in church, and there's reasons for it. Some of them were the most dishonest people I've ever met. Both sides of the mouth, all the time. You know, unless you're a sociopath, and I'm not trying to be funny, you know what that should do to you? It should give you guilt. It should bother you. Because you walk out one door talking about somebody, and then come around the other side, and you see them, and then, this happened to me. This happened to me at a store. And this was years ago, and something had happened, and there was like some tension at a church situation, and it got handled eventually, and things divided up, and I wasn't perfect in the matter, but I never talked about them. I never said anything. I didn't criticize them. We had a disagreement. We agreed to disagree, and that was it. But I know for a fact that they ran me in the ground. Because when you're on staff, that's just, you're kind of become a target. Sometimes you ask for it. And you pass them in a store, and when your conscience is clear, you know what you can do? Hey, brother, good to see you. Miss you. I don't miss everything about you, but I miss you. Good guy, I miss you. But when you run people in the ground, to anybody that will listen, you know what you'll do in the store? You'll avoid. Not make eye contact and look down. You don't have to live like that. Paul's giving you steps like, be genuine with people. Be real, be honest. Don't have a facade, Christian facade, or whatever it is that we develop. And when you see somebody, even somebody that you've disagreed with or had a dispute with, you can still look them in the eye and say, how are you doing? Verse 12, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies. So you've taken some stuff off, right? Lying and malice and blasphemy and anger and curse, all that filthy mouth, all these things. You're consciously trying to separate yourself from the old man, but you're still in it, so it's a fight. And then in verse 12, you got, therefore as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on certain things. Tender mercies, kindness, humility. Humility. Somebody said humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Humility isn't saying I'm not worth anything. That's not humility. Humility is strength under control. Put on humility. Put on meekness. Put on long-suffering. Bearing with one another. Listen, the year 2020 is coming. Stuff will happen. Bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so also must you also must do. You ever come to church mad at somebody? You feel peaceful? Did you handle it? Did you wait 6 months to deal with it? You know that unity comes not from perfect people. Unity comes from humility. And unity comes when people get on the same page. And unity comes, and you keep unity by letting somebody know you got a problem with them. And love, with tender mercies. So now we get to verse 15. And you have a connector word, right? We verse 1 through 14, you get to verse 15, and the first word of the verse lets you know that it's connected to the last 14 verses. And really, in some ways, the entire letter. What is word number 1 in verse 15? And let the peace of God be the arbitrator in your heart, to which also you are called in one body. There's a word here that's really interesting. Let me find it. Verse 14, but above all, this is huge. So you get to verse 14, and above everything he said, verse 1 through 13, he said a lot of good things. Verse 14, but above all these things, put on love. Okay, put on love, which is the bond, right? It's the bond of perfection. So the word bond is interesting. There's different kinds of, there's bail bonds and bonding in all those bad bonds, but there's a good bond. And it carries the word as like a ligament in your body, like I'm going to say knee. Okay, Adam's coach. A little while back, we're doing an open gym, playing full court. He's not nearly as old as me, but neither one of us should probably be running as we tried to do, and he hurt his knee. And I was guarding him, so I think I might have been part of that problem. But two old guys guarding each other, bad things happen. He fell hard, and he hurt his knee, and it really wasn't my fault. But he hurt his knee, and I heard it, and it popped, and his body shuddered, and I was like, this is bad. He's hurt bad. And we basically carried him off the court, and I was trying to discern whether or not he tore his outer knee ligament, which you got an inner one and an outer one, and then one I think goes up to the middle. It holds the knee together. And I said, what does your knee feel like? Because you can walk on it when you tear a ligament usually. And he said, it feels loose. And I said, not good. Don't know if it's torn. It doesn't really swell right off. Does it turn blue? Tear a ligament, you can't hardly see a difference. And I said, dude, you need to quit playing. You need to quit walking, running. Like I said, it's either torn or it's severely stretched. Because the ligaments in your knee keep every other bit part of your knee together. Keeps the bones together, keeps the kneecap in place, keeps all those things nice and tight the way God designed them. And in the same way, Paul said, all these things, these steps I've given you, and there's a bunch of them, but they don't need to be overwhelming. All these things I've given you to do to ensure that you have peace, the thing that is going to keep these things together is what? Like a ligament to the knee, love. Now why is that? Really quickly, and I'll be finished. If you think about all the things, like in verse 7 and 8, I think it is, that Paul said to put off like your natural man and all those bad things and put on other things, when you think about love, what do you think of? Love for who? Like, I love my fellow man, and that's going to keep this thing together. Not exactly. Not at first. It is love for God, which causes you to want to be sanctified, which gives you the ability and the motivation to love your neighbor and be patient with them when they're not a person who might be easy to be patient with. So love for God, sanctification, right? We become more like Christ, which was humility, willing to suffer for others, willing to give for others. He said, I came and I did not even come to do my will. I came to do my Father's will. Step number 1 for peace is doing the Father's will, which is an eternal mindset. But step number 2, if we boil all these, let's say 15 steps into 2 steps, it comes down to the very same thing we put on a wall in this church. Love God, sanctification, love people. The evidence for love for God is love for people. The evidence for love for God is sanctification, putting off the bad and putting on the new. And the thing that holds all of this together and may hold your family together or may not, if they're not believers, what do you do with people that may not be believers? I mean, what do you do if your standard is one way and theirs is a different one? How do you reconcile with somebody who biblically doesn't believe in reconciliation the way you do? I know for a fact that there's people in here that haven't talked to certain loved ones for years, and there's nothing you can do about it. They won't let you. They won't let you fix it. And you didn't even do it. They did it. And here you are trying to go to them and say, look, I don't want us to die like this. Right? It causes unrest, doesn't it? Paul said, despite all that, you can be at ease with these situations. The peace of God can be the arbitrator in your heart this year. And we have all the steps necessary, which again boils down to my love for Christ, which will lead to my love for people, which will lead to humility, which will lead to me not backstabbing them, which will lead to me loving them unconditionally, which will lead to me getting along with them as best as I can do, as Paul says in another letter. And then the tagline at the end of all of it, right? He said, okay, so love is the bond that keeps all this together. I mean, this is so simple. And every decent philosopher has said some of the main things that Christ has. Even secular, let me think, who was the Beatles wrote a song, all we need is love. Didn't they write that? Or is that McCartney, one of those? All we need is love. Well, he's right. Isn't he? Do you realize that as a secular, unsaved group of people that probably had a really bad negative influence on culture, that their main message was really, really good? They just didn't tell you how to get there? love through drugs and free relationships. They were so close, weren't they? Paul says the same thing, but he tells you how to get there. All you need to have peace is love. And you don't have to get high to feel that. Then at the very end, almost an afterthought, let the peace of God rule in your heart, to which also you were called in one body. That's the unity. And be thankful. Be grateful. I think, to me, I could be wrong, but I look at this last word as like kind of filling in the cracks with this bond and this love and this unity and things I put off and things I put on and things I do and things I don't do. And like in between it all, as the days are difficult and there's days I don't want to put off anything, or I want to keep my old man because it's easier and not worry about sanctification. In between it all, I'm to be grateful. And I think that's like the thing that kind of keeps me steady on the days when I'm not doing so good, right? I get to the end of the day, did anybody else but me, are you going to have to clean your house out to make room for more stuff? I look at my closet, and it's not huge, but it's and there's 2 racks, like, it's just, I don't know who designed it, but it's insane. Like, you can't reach anything in the back. And I'm not, I'm a dude, so it isn't like I change my clothes out like I should. Sometimes I do. Summer, winter, right? But I'm looking at all the stuff and kid stuff in our house, and every year I say the same thing. Where am I putting all of this stuff? We have, do you realize that we have materialistically more stuff as modern day Americans than most people for all of civilizations? Every civilization ever. I mean, you go back 50, 60, 70 years. I joke with somebody before church, I'm going to get my closet down to 7 shirts. I want 7 shirts. 1 for every day of the week. That's it. And then some t-shirts, 7 t-shirts maybe. And my little chest of drawers. And all this other stuff, because I can't wear it all and it stresses me out. I feel like I'm supposed to rotate it in. I need a 7-shirt rotation. Folks, we are materialistically, we are so blessed. Even if we're not at the top of the food chain, upper class, we are lower middle class, middle to upper. We have more stuff than most people for the last, I would say, 6,000 years have had. So, do we want peace? Do you want peace this year? Don't be, this is my challenge, and I'll pray we'll be finished when we're brought on to announcements and offering and such, or offering announcements. Don't be unfair to God and get 2 months into the year, the same as you were last year, not sleeping good, and worried all the time about a million things. These new moms these days, I love you, but park the helicopter and walk away from your child. Let them fall down. Tricia, are you watching? Let them get hurt. Let them get dirty. Let them eat dirt. Did you know that dirt is actually kind of good for you? A little bit. In small measures. But man, I said, I'm in trouble for this one, I really am. There's somebody in my family that right before Christmas, as if things weren't stressful enough, they had the idea to invite it's not my mom, to invite separately, all the families over separately, because they weren't all going to be together at Christmas, and have a dinner like 4 nights in a row separately leading up to Christmas Eve. And this was my response. Okay? Well, I'm black and white, so I said, lovely person. When they invited, I said, yeah, sure we'll come, but we don't have to do anything, so there's no stress on us. But this is my theory about some people, some of us. We get to holiday season, and we're not stressed enough. You know where I'm going? And this is what we do. Some of y'all have guilt because you're not stressed enough because it's holidays. So you keep decorating or cooking or inviting people over, not to have one big meal, intentionally to have 4 or 5 separate meals consecutively with a full-time job. And I said, this is my theory. It's Christmas time, and it's like 2 weeks out, so you're not feeling the stress yet, but it's coming. You don't have to, but it is. And I know some of you ladies are like, you're a dude, so you don't understand the stress. I get that. But I do, because I have to pay for a lot of it, so that could be stressful, but it isn't. I think the theory is, I'm not stressed enough, and it's holiday season, and I should be stressed. So now I have guilt and anxiety because why am I not stressed? So now I'm going to add things to my plate to make sure I'm good and stressed. Is that a good theory? I think it is. And it does make sense. Thank you, Brother David. It does. And I'm telling y'all, we're not going to be here long. I don't mean here, like I turned 45 this year. This is midlife. That's dumb. This isn't midlife. I'm not going to be 90. Probably. This midlife was like 40, probably, for me. 35. Thank you, Dad. According to the Bible standard, you're promised 70. So 35 is midlife. I'm well into the third quarter. I've got kids I want to enjoy. I've got a baby now. I want to enjoy. I've got life. I got a vocation I love to enjoy. Why do I have to let secular culture make me stressed? It's dumb. So man, put a stake in the ground this morning and say, I've got 1,000 reasons to be anxious. I've got a stressful job, you might say. I've got a fast-paced job, you might say, or whatever. I've got a family member that's nuts, or I've got a mother that's crazy, or mother-in-law, or what? I'm not talking about me. Whatever. I've got a sibling that I can't get along with. Again, not me, thankfully. We go in the woods together and dig holes with shovels, so go figure. We love it. Love every minute of it. And I'm grateful for that. We've got 1,000 reasons to be stressed, and I'm telling you, if you don't have a reason today to be stressed in 2020, it will not take long in 2020, and something's going to happen, and the peace in your heart is going to be gone. And I'm telling you, don't let that be like the default, like the standard. Well, I'm an adult, and I'm adulting. That's the new thing. T-shirts. I'm not going to adult today. Oh, please don't wear that for me, please. Because I'm going to be like, dude, you're an adult, so rip the shirt off like Hulk and go be an adult. But it doesn't have to be so stressful. So put a stake in the ground. I'm going to have, last week I preached on having peace with others. Remember that third point? And I mentioned a restaurant, like as a bad waitress, and you get, my coffee's cold and whatever else. Do you know what happened when we left here and went to a restaurant? I will not name it because this is a good restaurant usually. Do you know what happened? There's 30 people in there getting lunch. Guess how many waitresses? No. Guess what kind of service we got? Yeah. And I said, I didn't want to be tested today. But we were. My mom and dad all with us, and we were very patient. I don't know if anybody ever got all their food. But I listen, and I'll use myself real quick as an example again with little Sophie. If Trish and I let this is going to be an emotional roller coaster. And it is going to be a roller coaster. But this in here, for the most part, can stay like this, can it? That's what Paul said. He doesn't give conditions. Let the peace of God rule in your heart unless you're trying to adopt, or unless you got a fast-paced job, unless you got 2 jobs, as some of you do, unless you have difficulties in your family. Paul says, amidst all of that, let the peace of God rule in your heart. So don't be unfair to God. Don't pray for peace and not look at verses 1 through 14. Don't read verse 15 in a vacuum and say, okay, Lord, here I am. I'm not going to worry about any obedience to your word, but please give me peace. Let me tell you what's going to happen. not going to have peace. Then you're getting mad at God because you don't have peace as a believer. And you're going to hold it against God, which is going to give you further anxiety and get you further from God. And He's saying you can have peace, but you got to do stuff. So let's do stuff this year. Let's do good stuff. And let's enjoy life this year. Let's pray. Lord, we are grateful for this peace. Lord, we all know as adults and even young people that this can get so bent out of shape with different situations in life, many of which we did not ask for nor can control. But I pray that we see this morning we have steps we can take and we can have a peaceful year where we're close to you and we know we're close to you. And difficult things happen, but we keep on and we're steady. Lord, if there's anybody here that doesn't know you this morning, who has never known peace, I pray that they would stay today and ask questions and talk and be willing to pursue this peace they can have with you. I ask you all these things this morning in Jesus' name. Amen.